The president of one of the largest companies in the country leaves a tense meeting, weighed down by cruel and impersonal decisions. But his world turns upside down when he meets a girl offering her only friend in exchange for food. If you were touched by this beautiful story of resilience and love, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Continuing. The January wind cut through Boston's financial district like a knife, carrying with it the promise of snow before nightfall. Ethan Parker pulled his cashmere coat tighter as he exited the imposing glass tower of Meridian Technologies, his face a mask of controlled frustration. At 42, he had finally achieved what he'd spent his entire career pursuing: the position of CEO at one of America's most prestigious financial software companies. Yet 3 months into the role, the victory felt hollow. Inside the boardroom he had just left, the faces of his executive team lingered in his mind. Expectant, demanding, ruthless. Their voices echoed in his head, a chorus of corporate mantras about necessary downsizing and streamlining operations. The quarterly numbers weren't meeting projections. Shareholders were getting nervous. The solution, as always, was simple: cut costs, eliminate redundancies, maximize efficiency. People weren't people anymore in those discussions. They were budget line items, resources to be allocated or discarded. Ethan had nodded along, made notes on his tablet, promised decisive action. It was what they expected from him. It was why they had chosen him. "Mr. Parker, your car is ready," called his assistant Jeremy, jogging slightly to catch up with Ethan's determined stride across the plaza. "I think I'll walk back to the office," Ethan replied, surprising himself as much as Jeremy. "Tell Davis I'll be 30 minutes late for the next meeting." Jeremy's brow furrowed with concern. "But sir, the operations review—" "Will wait," Ethan finished firmly. "I need to clear my head." The young assistant hesitated, then nodded. Hand retreated back toward the building. Ethan turned away, loosening his tie slightly as he set off down the street. The cold air felt good against his face, clarifying, almost punishing in its intensity. It matched his mood. The sidewalks bustled with the lunchtime crowd, people hurrying from one warm place to another, heads down against the wind. Ethan moved. Among them, anonymous despite his expensive coat and handmade shoes. Just another face in the crowd, just another man with decisions to make. He was so absorbed in his thoughts that he almost missed her. A small figure huddled at the edge of a small park that separated two office buildings. If not for a flash of bright pink against the grey landscape, he might have walked right past. But something made him slow his steps. A little girl, no more than 7 or 8 years old, sat on a folding stool beside a cardboard sign. She wore a pink coat that seemed at least 2 sizes too large, its fabric worn at the elbows and hem. In her arms, wrapped in what appeared to be a hand-knitted scarf, was a small puppy with floppy ears and soulful eyes. The sign propped against her stool read in careful, childish handwriting, "Puppy for sale, needs a good home." Ethan stopped. The child shouldn't be out here alone, especially not in this weather. Where were her parents? Why wasn't she in school? He glanced around, expecting to see an adult nearby, but the girl appeared to be completely on her own. As if sensing his attention, she looked up. Their eyes met, and Ethan felt something shift inside him. There was no fear in her gaze, no childish pleading or manipulation, just a steady, serious expression that seemed far too old for her small face. "How much?" he heard himself ask, stepping closer. The girl straightened slightly. $50, she replied, her voice clear and surprisingly composed. "He's a good dog. He doesn't bark much, and he's already learning to sit." As if on cue, the puppy wriggled in her arms, its tail wagging hopefully at the prospect of attention. It was some kind of terrier mix, Ethan guessed, with white and brown patches and oversized paws that suggested it would grow considerably larger. "Why are you selling him?" Ethan asked, crouching down to her level despite the protest of his expensive suit pants against the cold concrete. The girl hesitated, then spoke with simple directness. "Mom needs medicine and we need food. He eats a lot." She stroked the puppy's head gently. "He's my only friend, but Mom is more important." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. Here, Outside his climate-controlled boardrooms and spreadsheet projections was the human cost of an economy that had left too many behind. A child selling her only companion to buy necessities that should be a given in a country as wealthy as theirs. Without hesitation, he reached for his wallet and extracted $300 in crisp bills. "I'll take him," he said, holding out the money. The girl's eyes widened at the amount, but she shook her head. "It's only $50, she insisted. "The rest is to help with your mum's medicine," Ethan explained, "and food." She considered this for a long moment, then nodded solemnly. But as Ethan reached for the puppy, she pulled back slightly. "You have to promise to take care of him," she said, "and you have to sign this." From inside her coat, she produced a folded piece of paper, a page torn from a school notebook. On it, she had written in the same careful handwriting, "Puppy Adoption Agreement." Below were simple terms. The new owner promised to feed the dog, give it water, take it for walks, and never abandon it. Ethan felt something catch in his throat. "Do you have a pen?" he asked. She produced a chewed pencil, and he signed his name at the bottom of the page. Only then did she carefully transfer the puppy into his arms, wrapping the scarf around it with tender attention. "His name is Charlie," she said. "He likes to sleep with a ticking clock because it sounds like a heartbeat." Ethan nodded, suddenly unsure what he was doing with a puppy in the middle of a workday. "What's your name?" he asked. "Lily," she answered. "Lily Anderson." "Where's your mum, Lily? Does she know you're out here?" A shadow passed over the girl's face. "She's at home. She's sick today." She carefully folded the money and agreement paper, tucking them into an inside pocket of her oversized coat. "I need to get back now. Thank you for giving Charlie a good home." As she stood and began folding her stool, Ethan noticed something that made his blood run cold. On the sleeve of her coat, barely visible beneath a stain, was an embroidered logo. A logo he recognized immediately. It was from Meridian's Family First program, an employee support initiative that provided winter coats to employees' children as part of a holiday charity drive. The program he had personally eliminated 3 months ago as one of his first cost-cutting measures as CEO. "Lily," he began, but she was already walking away, her small form receding down the sidewalk. For a moment he considered following her, but the puppy in his arms whimpered, bringing him back to the present situation. Ethan stood there on the cold street corner, a $3,000 suit under his wool coat, holding a mixed-breed puppy, wrapped in a homemade scarf, watching a little girl walk away with money that probably represented more than her mother made in a week. And yet somehow he felt like he was the one who had received charity in this exchange. His phone buzzed in his pocket, undoubtedly Jeremy wondering where he was. The operations review was waiting. Decisions about more cuts needed to be made. Numbers needed to be met. But suddenly none of that seemed as important as finding out why a Meridian employee's child was selling her puppy on a street corner in the middle of a school day. With the puppy tucked securely under his coat, Ethan turned and began walking rapidly back toward Meridian Tower. His meeting would have to wait. He had research to do. Chapter 2. The Discovery. "Sir, your 3 o'clock is waiting in the conference room, and is that a dog?" Jeremy stood frozen in the doorway of Ethan's office, his professional composure momentarily shattered by the sight of his boss sitting behind his immaculate desk, with a puppy exploring the plush carpet. "Cancel my meetings for the rest of the day," Ethan said, without looking up from his computer screen. "And find someone to get dog supplies, food, a bed, whatever puppies need." "Dog supplies," Jeremy repeated, as if Ethan had asked him to procure uranium. "For the office?" "For now." Ethan finally looked up. "And I need access to the HR database, specifically termination records from the past 6 months. Jeremy's expression shifted from confusion to concern. "Sir, those records are confidential. I'd need Director Collins' authorization to—" "I'm—" "The CEO, Jeremy," Ethan interrupted, his voice quiet but firm. "If I need to sign something, bring it to me, but I need those records within the hour." After Jeremy left, still visibly puzzled but too professional to question further, Ethan turned his attention back to the puppy. Charlie had finished his exploration and now sat looking up at him with curious eyes, head tilted slightly, as if asking what happened next. "Good question," Ethan murmured, reaching down to scratch behind the dog's ears. "I'm not entirely sure myself." He couldn't explain the strange compulsion he felt to investigate the girl's situation. In his 20 years of corporate climbing, he'd made countless difficult decisions, implemented restructuring plans that affected thousands of employees. It was part of business, necessary for survival in a competitive marketplace. He'd never allowed himself to dwell on individual cases. But something about Lily Anderson, her serious eyes, her careful handwriting on that makeshift adoption contract, the coat with his company's logo, had pierced through the protective layers he'd built around himself. He couldn't simply return to quarterly projections and efficiency matrices without knowing her story. An hour later, with Charlie dozing on an improvised bed made from Ethan's spare gym clothes, Jeremy returned with a USB drive and a troubled expression. "The records, sir," he said, placing the drive on Ethan's desk, "and Ms. Bailey from PR asked me to remind you about the press statement regarding the customer service restructuring." "Tell her I'll have it tomorrow," Ethan replied, already inserting the drive into his computer. "Thank you, Jeremy, that'll be all." Alone again, Ethan opened the personnel files and began his search. Anderson wasn't an uncommon surname, but he found her quickly enough. Sarah Anderson, Customer Experience Specialist, terminated November 10th, exactly 3 months ago, during his first wave of operational streamlining. He scanned her file with growing unease. 8 years with the company, consistently positive performance reviews, multiple customer commendations. Yet her termination notice cited failure to follow established protocols resulting in system vulnerability, corporate language for a serious procedural violation. The termination had been recommended by her direct supervisor, Mark Winters, and approved by the department head, Linda Collins. As CEO, Ethan had signed off on a batch of 40 similar terminations that week, trusting his management team's assessments without reviewing individual cases. Something didn't add up. An employee with Sarah Anderson's record wouldn't suddenly ignore critical protocols. Digging deeper, he found the incident report. During a system update, Anderson had allegedly bypassed security measures, potentially exposing customer data. The report was detailed, technical, and, to Ethan's experienced eye, suspiciously perfect in assigning blame to a single point of failure. He picked up his phone and dialed IT security. "This is Parker. I need all logs and communications related to the November system update, specifically the incident involving Sarah Anderson in customer experience." He paused, listening to the hesitant response. "Yes, I understand it's unusual. Consider it an executive review of our security protocols." My eyes only within the hour. While waiting, Ethan found himself staring at Sarah Anderson's employee photo. She had warm brown eyes and a genuine smile, not the forced expression many people adopted for corporate headshots. According to her file, she was 34, a single mother, and had started at Meridian in an entry-level position before working her way up to specialist. His computer chimed with an incoming email from IT security. The files were extensive, but as Ethan began reviewing them, a very different picture emerged. The system vulnerability hadn't originated with Sarah at all. Logs clearly showed the issue stemmed from an unannounced change pushed by the development team. Sarah had actually identified the problem and attempted to alert her superiors, but the timeline of events in the official report had been subtly altered, placing the blame on her instead of acknowledging the development team's error. More disturbing still were the email exchanges between Mark Winters and Linda Collins, discussing the need to make an example after the embarrassing security lapse, and noting that Anderson, as a single mother, lacked the political capital to challenge their decision. The puppy whimpered, drawing Ethan's attention away from the screen. Charlie had woken and was looking at him with those soulful eyes, as if sensing his distress. "They set her up," Ethan told the dog, his voice tight with anger. "They needed a scapegoat, and they chose her because she was vulnerable." And he had signed off on it without question, trusting a system that rewarded swift, decisive action over careful investigation. He'd been complicit in an injustice that had left a woman without income and her daughter selling a beloved pet on a street corner in the dead of winter. The intercom buzzed, and Jeremy's voice came through. "Sir, the dog supplies have arrived. Should I bring them in?" "Yes," Ethan replied, minimizing the damning files on his screen. "And then I need you to find an address for me." Half an hour later, with Charlie outfitted with a new collar and leash, Ethan stood in the executive parking garage beside his Tesla, contemplating his next move. The address Jeremy had found for Sarah Anderson was in Dorchester, a working-class neighborhood far from Meridian's gleaming downtown headquarters. What exactly did he plan to do? Show up unannounced at her door and say, "What?" "Sorry, my company." "Unjustly fired you. I bought your daughter's dog. Can I come in?" The absurdity of the situation struck him suddenly, and he might have laughed if not for the knot of guilt tightening in his chest. He was about to put Charlie in the carrier Jeremy had purchased when his phone rang. The display showed Linda Collins' name. "Ethan, what's this I hear about you requesting termination records?" Her voice was carefully modulated to sound concerned rather than confrontational. "Is there an issue I should know about?" "Just reviewing our procedures," he replied, keeping his tone neutral, "making sure we're following best practices." "Of course." She paused. "The board is quite pleased with the results of our restructuring efforts. The Q1 projections are already looking stronger." The subtext was clear. Don't rock the boat. The ties cuts were working. The shareholders were happy. "I appreciate the update, Linda," he said. "We'll discuss it at tomorrow's executive meeting." After ending the call, Ethan sat in his car for a long moment, Charlie's carrier on the passenger seat beside him. He had two choices: return to his office, draft the press statement about the customer service improvements, and continue along the path that had brought him to the CEO position, or drive to Dorchester and face the human consequences of the system he had championed for so long. In the carrier, Charlie pawed at the mesh window, making small whining sounds that seemed to echo Ethan's inner conflict. "All right," he said finally, starting the car. "We're going to return you to your real family, and then, I don't know what then." As he navigated through Boston's afternoon traffic, Ethan's mind raced with questions. What kind of reception would he receive? Would Sarah Anderson slam the door in his face? Would she call a lawyer? Should he offer her job back? A settlement? And why did he care so much about this one case among the hundreds of similar decisions he'd made throughout his career? He didn't have answers, but as he turned onto the street where the Andersons lived, a row of modest triple-deckers with narrow porches and small front yards, he knew he couldn't go back to seeing employees as mere entries on a spreadsheet. Not after meeting Lily, not after discovering the truth about Sarah's termination. The puppy had changed something in him, or perhaps awakened something long dormant. And as he parked in front of the address Jeremy had provided, Ethan realized that whatever happened next would irrevocably alter the course of his carefully plotted corporate life. With Charlie's carrier in one hand and a bag of dog supplies in the other, he climbed the worn steps to the Andersons' front door and took a deep breath before ringing the bell. Chapter 3. The Confrontation. The apartment building was well maintained despite its age, with a fresh coat of paint on the railings and neatly swept steps. Ethan shifted his weight from one foot to the other as he waited, suddenly aware of how out of place he must look in his tailored suit and cashmere coat. Charlie whined softly from inside the carrier, perhaps recognizing the familiar surroundings. Just as Ethan was about to ring the bell again, the door opened. A woman stood there, clearly Lily's mother. They shared the same thoughtful eyes, though hers were shadowed with exhaustion. Sarah Anderson looked thinner than in her employee photo, her brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a faded sweater, and her expression shifted from polite inquiry to shock as she recognized him. "Mr. Parker," she said, her voice perfectly steady despite the surprise evident on her face. "This is unexpected." Ethan cleared his throat. "Ms. Anderson, I believe I have something that belongs to your daughter." He lifted the carrier slightly, and Charlie barked in response. Sarah's eyes widened. Charlie? She looked back at Ethan, confusion and wariness battling across her features. I don't understand. How did you— Mom, who's at the door? Lily appeared beside her mother, and her face lit up at the sight of the carrier. Charlie, you brought him back. Before either adult could respond, Lily had pushed past her mother and was opening the carrier, scooping the excited puppy into her arms. Charlie licked her face enthusiastically, his entire body wiggling with joy at the reunion. I thought you wanted to sell him, Ethan said gently. I did, Lily answered, her face buried in Charlie's fur. But I missed him so much. Sarah placed a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder, her gaze never leaving Ethan's face. Lily, take Charlie inside, please. I need to speak with Mr. Parker. The girl hesitated, clearly reluctant to be separated from her pet again. He's not taking Charlie back, is he? No, sweetheart. Charlie's staying with us. Go on now. Once, Lily had disappeared into the apartment. Sarah crossed her arms, her posture shifting from surprise to defensive. How did you find us? Your address was in your employee file, Ethan admitted. I should have called first. I apologize for showing up unannounced. My employee file, she repeated flatly. The one that says I compromised company security and deserve to be fired without warning. That employee file. The directness of her question caught him off guard, though it shouldn't have. Of course she knew what her termination letter had stated. She'd lived with the consequences for 3 months. That's actually why I'm here, Ethan said. I've been reviewing your case and it appears there were significant misrepresentations in the incident report. Sarah let out a small, bitter laugh. You mean they lied? I could have told you that in November, Mr. Parker. In fact, I tried to. I sent 3 appeals to HR and 2 emails directly to your office. I never received a response. Ethan felt a flush of shame. How many employee appeals had been filtered out before reaching him? How many legitimate grievances had his assistants politely deflected with form letters while he focused on big-picture strategy? I wasn't aware of your appeals, he said honestly, but I am now, and I'm here to make it right. Sarah studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Finally, she stepped back from the doorway. You'd better come in. It's too cold to have this conversation on the porch. The apartment was small but immaculately kept. Modest furniture showed signs of wear, but was arranged with care. The walls displayed framed drawings, Lily's artwork, Ethan presumed, alongside. A few family photographs. A dining table in the corner was covered with neatly stacked job application forms and a laptop. Lily sat on a worn couch with Charlie in her lap, whispering to the puppy as she stroked his fur. She looked up as they entered, her eyes moving between her mother and Ethan with a child's perceptive wariness. Lily, Mr. Parker needs to talk to me for a few minutes. Why don't you take Charlie to your room and show him his bed? The girl nodded, solemnly, and carried the puppy down a short hallway, glancing back once before disappearing into a room. Sarah gestured to the small kitchen table. Would you like coffee? It's nothing fancy, but it's hot. That would be nice, thank you. As she busied herself with the coffee maker, Ethan noticed a pile of medical papers on the counter, partially covered by a newspaper. A prescription bottle sat nearby, its label showing a recent date. Sarah placed a mug in front of him and took the seat opposite, her own coffee untouched. So the CEO of Meridian Technologies personally delivers my daughter's dog and tells me he wants to make things right. What exactly does that mean, Mr. Parker? Her directness was refreshing after months of carefully calibrated corporate communications. No posturing, no strategic ambiguity, just a straightforward question demanding an equally straightforward answer. It means I've discovered that you were wrongfully terminated, Ethan replied. The system vulnerability wasn't your fault. You actually tried to report it, but your warnings were ignored. When the breach happened anyway, Mark Winters and Linda Collins decided to use you as a scapegoat. Sarah's hands tightened around her. And you're just figuring this out now, 3 months later? Yes, he admitted. I should have investigated sooner. The termination report crossed my desk along with dozens of others, and I signed off on it without questioning the details. That was a serious failure on my part. A failure, she repeated, her voice steady, but with an undercurrent of restrained anger. Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like a deliberate choice to value efficiency over accuracy, to prioritize cost-cutting over people's livelihoods. The words stung because they were true. How? Many times had he championed streamlining processes without considering the human beings affected by those processes. You're right, he said simply. And I can't change what happened, but I can try to rectify it now. I'd like to offer you your position back at Meridian with full back pay for the time you've been away, and a formal acknowledgement that your termination was made in error. Sarah leaned back in her chair, studying him with those perceptive eyes. Why now? What changed? Because it wasn't just running into Lily today. You could have given her the money, taken the dog and gone back to your office without another thought. Ethan considered deflecting with a corporate response about continuous improvement or organizational values, but Sarah Anderson deserved better than PR platitudes. I saw her coat, he said quietly. The Family First program logo. The program I cancelled as one of my first acts as CEO, and then I saw her selling her dog, her only friend, as she put it, because her mother needed medicine. He met Sarah's gaze directly. It made me question what kind of company I'm building. What kind of leader I want to be. A flicker of surprise crossed Sarah's features quickly, replaced by caution. That's very philosophical, Mr. Parker, but corporate values don't pay rent or buy groceries. For 3 months I've been piecing together freelance work while fighting a system that labeled me incompetent and dishonest. Do you know what that's like? To know you're right but have no way to prove it. To watch your savings disappear while you're sending out resume after resume, knowing that your former employer is poisoning every application with a termination for cause. No, Ethan admitted. I don't know what that's like. And now you show up with an offer to restore what never should have been taken away in the first place, expecting what? Gratitude? The question hung in the air between them. Ethan realized with uncomfortable clarity that some part of him had indeed expected gratitude, or at least relief. The magnanimous CEO descending from his tower to right a wrong. How arrogant that assumption seemed now, faced with the reality of Sarah's struggle. I don't expect gratitude, he said finally. I expect skepticism, distrust even. I haven't earned anything else. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. What I'm offering isn't charity or a favor. It's an acknowledgement of a wrong that needs to be corrected. If you want to return to Meridian, the position is yours. If you'd prefer not to work for the company again, which would be completely understandable, I'm prepared to discuss a settlement that would compensate you properly for the unjust termination. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. You know what the strangest part is? I loved that job. Despite everything, I believed in what we were doing, helping people navigate their finances, secure their futures. I was good at it. A sad smile crossed her face. I still have all the thank you notes from my clients. I kept them in a notebook on my desk. I wonder what happened to it. I can find out, Ethan said, making a mental note to have Jeremy track down her personal effects. The sound of laughter drifted from down the hallway, Lily playing with Charlie. Sarah's expression softened at the sound. She missed that dog terribly, she said. I told her we couldn't afford to keep him anymore, with the medical bills and everything else. She didn't cry or argue. She just made that little sign and took him to the park. Said she wanted to find him a good home herself. Pride and sadness mingled in her voice. She's 8 years old, Mr. Parker. 8 years old, and already making impossible choices. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with his usual stress. She shouldn't have to make those choices. No child should. No, Sarah agreed, they shouldn't. But the world isn't always kind to single mothers who lose their jobs under suspicious circumstances. She took a sip of her coffee, then set the mug down decisively. I want to think about your offer, and I'd like to see the evidence you found regarding my termination. If I'm going to return to Meridian, I need to know exactly what happened and who was responsible. Of course, I'll have copies sent to you tomorrow, and take all the time you need to decide. Sarah nodded, then called down the hallway. Lily, can you come out here, please? The girl appeared with Charlie trotting at her heels, looking between the adults with cautious hope. Is Charlie staying with us? Yes, Sarah said, resting a hand on her daughter's shoulder. Mr. Parker brought him back because he knew how much we missed him. Lily turned to Ethan, her serious eyes studying him with a child's directness. Thank you for bringing Charlie home and for the money for Mom's medicine. You're welcome. Lily, Ethan replied, unexpectedly moved by her simple gratitude. I think Charlie belongs with you. Me too, she agreed solemnly. Then, with the quick shifts of mood only children can manage, she brightened. Do you want to see the drawings I made of him? Before Ethan could respond, she had darted back to her room, returning moments later with several crayon drawings of a brown and white dog. As she spread them across the table, explaining each picture in detail, Ethan found himself drawn into her world, a world where dogs wore superhero capes and helped children fight imaginary monsters. And watching Sarah's face soften as she listened to her daughter's animated explanations, Ethan realized that the most important reparation he could make had nothing to do with corporate policies or financial settlements. It was about restoring dignity and trust to a family that had been badly wounded by a system he helped create. The real work was just beginning. Chapter 4. The Challenge. The Meridian Technologies executive boardroom fell silent as Ethan finished speaking. 12 faces stared back at him with expressions ranging from shock to calculated neutrality. The morning sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the tension that now filled the room. Let me make sure I understand, Linda Collins said, breaking the silence. As head of human resources, she had the most to lose from what Ethan was proposing. You want to not only rehire Sarah Anderson, an employee terminated for cause, but promote her to a newly created position as Senior Customer Experience Consultant, reporting directly to you. That's correct, Ethan confirmed, his voice calm despite the hammering of his heart. He hadn't slept well the night before, rehearsing this moment in his mind. And I want a full review of all terminations from the past 6 months, conducted by an independent third party. Mark Winters, the department manager who had recommended Sarah's termination, leaned forward. Ethan, with all due respect, this is an extreme overreaction to a single case. Anderson violated protocols that— She didn't, Ethan interrupted, sliding copies of the evidence he'd gathered across the polished table. These are the actual system logs from the incident. They clearly show that the vulnerability originated with an unannounced code push from development. Anderson not only followed protocols, she attempted to alert her supervisors to the problem. The executives leafed through the documents with varying degrees of discomfort. Linda Collins barely glanced at hers, her lips pressed into a thin line. Even if there were irregularities in this particular case, she said carefully, creating a special position for one employee sends a problematic message to the rest of the staff. It suggests that anyone who complains loudly enough can circumvent our established processes. Ethan met her gaze steadily. The problematic message, Linda, was sent when we fired a dedicated employee to cover up someone else's mistake. When we labeled her incompetent, rather than acknowledging a systemic failure, he gestured to the documents, and when certain members of management deliberately altered timelines in the incident report to shift blame. A tense silence followed. This accusation, CFO Robert Jenkins cleared his throat. While I appreciate your concern for fairness, Ethan, have you considered the financial implications? The back pay, the potential precedent for other terminated employees, the cost of this new position. It all impacts our bottom line at a time when shareholders are expecting continued cost reductions. It was the argument Ethan had anticipated, the one he would have made himself 3 days ago. Numbers on a spreadsheet, efficiency metrics, shareholder value. I have considered it, Robert, he replied, and I've run the projections. The cost of rehiring Ms. Anderson and conducting the termination review amounts to less than 1% of our quarterly operating budget, but the cost of continuing to operate without accountability, without integrity, that's incalculable. This isn't just about Anderson, is it? Linda asked, her tone sharpening. This is about your new vision for the company, the one you haven't bothered to share with the leadership team. Ethan took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth, the point where he either retreated to the safety of corporate convention or committed to the change he now knew was necessary. You're right, he acknowledged. This is about more than one wrongful termination. It's about the kind of company we want to build. He stood, moving to the window that overlooked Boston's financial district. 3 months ago, I told you all that my priority as CEO would be maximizing shareholder value. I believed that was the only metric that mattered, the bottom line at any cost. He turned back to face the room. I was wrong. A company isn't just a vehicle for generating profits. It's a community of people whose lives are profoundly affected by our decisions. When we treat employees as disposable resources rather than valued contributors, we don't just harm them. We damage the very foundation of what makes Meridian successful. Mark Winters rolled his eyes slightly. Very inspiring, Ethan. But Meridian isn't a charity. We have responsibilities to our investors, our clients, and to our employees, Ethan finished firmly. Those responsibilities aren't in conflict, unless we make them so. In fact, the data suggests the opposite. He nodded to his assistant, who distributed another set of documents. These are the customer satisfaction ratings from Ms. Anderson's department before and after her termination. Notice the significant decline. The executives studied the graphs with reluctant interest as Ethan continued. When we cut the family. First program to save money, we didn't just eliminate a non-essential benefit. We took away a support system that helped our most vulnerable employees remain productive. When we terminated experienced staff to meet arbitrary reduction targets, we lost institutional knowledge that can't be quantified on a balance sheet. Linda Collins closed her folder with a sharp snap. So what exactly are you proposing, Ethan? That we abandon fiscal discipline entirely? Rehire everyone who's ever been let go? The board would have you removed within a week. I'm proposing balance, Ethan replied. Fiscal responsibility that doesn't come at the expense of our ethical obligations. Starting with correcting a clear injustice in the case of Sarah Anderson. Robert Jenkins studied Ethan with calculated assessment. And if we oppose this correction? If the leadership team believes this sets a dangerous precedent, Ethan had considered this possibility as well. Then I'll fund Ms. Anderson's position and the independent review from my own discretionary budget. This isn't a request for permission, Robert. It's a courtesy notification of a decision I've already made. The statement hung in the air, a clear challenge to the authority dynamics that had governed Meridian for years. Several executives exchanged glances, silently calculating where their interests now lay. After a long moment, James Turner, the silver-haired chief technology officer, who rarely spoke at these meetings, cleared his throat. I've reviewed the technical aspects of Ms. Anderson's case, he said, tapping the system logs. There's no question she was made a scapegoat for a development error that should have been caught in testing. If we're going to build the kind of products we claim to care about, we need people who aren't afraid to point out problems, even when it's inconvenient. The unexpected support shifted the energy in the room. Other executives began to nod, sensing the changing tide. Linda Collins, however, remained unmoved. The board won't like this, Ethan. They hired you to streamline operations, not launch moral crusades. Then I'll explain it to them, Ethan replied calmly. In terms they'll understand. Customer retention, long-term growth, and sustainable business practices. But first I'm going to call Sarah Anderson and offer her the position we discussed, unless there are any other objections. He looked around, the table meeting each executive's gaze in turn. A few looked away, others nodded slightly. No one spoke. Good, Ethan said. Meeting adjourned. As the executives filed out, Linda Collins lingered, waiting until they were alone before approaching Ethan. This isn't over, she said quietly. You're undermining months of careful restructuring because you had one emotional encounter with a sob story. That's not leadership, Ethan, it's weakness. Ethan considered her words carefully before responding. You know, Linda, I used to think like that. That compassion was weakness. That true leadership meant making the tough calls without flinching, no matter who got hurt. He gathered his papers into his briefcase. But I've come to believe that the real weakness is hiding behind spreadsheets and protocols instead of facing the human consequences of our decisions. Very poetic, she replied coldly. Let's see if you still feel that way when the board reviews our quarterly numbers. After she left, Ethan sank back into his chair, the adrenaline of confrontation slowly ebbing. He picked up his phone and dialed Sarah's number, the one she'd given him 2 days earlier when he'd left her apartment. She answered on the third ring. Mr. Parker. Ms. Anderson, he replied. I've just finished meeting with the executive team. The position is yours if you want it. Senior Customer Experience Consultant, reporting directly to me, with full back pay and benefits from the date of your termination. There was a pause on the other end of the line. And the people responsible for falsifying the report. They've been put on notice. The evidence has been documented and added to their personnel files, and there will be a complete review of all terminations from the past 6 months, conducted by an independent firm. Another pause. You're serious about this? Completely. Why? The question was simple but profound. Why go to all this trouble for one employee? Ethan thought about Lily's serious eyes as she handed him that makeshift adoption contract, about the notebook full of customer thank you, notes that Jeremy had found in a storage box and delivered to his office that morning, about the sharp decline in customer satisfaction metrics after Sarah's departure. Because it's the right thing to do, he said finally, and because Meridian will be a better company with you than without you. When would I start? Monday, if that works for you. We'll need to bring you up to speed on the changes since you've been gone, but your first project will be a comprehensive review of our customer experience procedures. I want your honest assessment without filters. And if that assessment isn't what the executive team wants to hear, then they'll need to adjust their expectations, Ethan replied. Because I'm not interested in comfortable fictions anymore. I want the truth, even when it's inconvenient, especially then. There was a smile in Sarah's voice when she answered. Monday works. And Ethan? Thank you. It was the first time she'd used his first name, and somehow that small shift felt more significant than all the corporate policy changes he'd proposed that morning. Don't thank me yet, he said. The real work is just beginning. After ending the call, Ethan opened his desk drawer and took out the notebook Jeremy had recovered, a simple spiral-bound book filled with handwritten notes from customers, thanking Sarah for her patience, her understanding, her willingness to go beyond the script to solve their problems, the kind of quality that couldn't be quantified in quarterly reports but made all the difference in people's lives. On Monday, he would return it to its rightful owner, and together they would begin the challenging work of rebuilding what had been broken, not just for Sarah and Lily, but for all the employees who deserved better than what Meridian had become. His phone buzzed with a message from Jeremy. Board. Chairman requesting urgent call regarding this morning's executive meeting. Ethan smiled slightly. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since taking the CEO position, he felt certain he was fighting for the right cause. Chapter 5. The Transformation. Sarah Anderson stood in front of the elevator doors at Meridian Tower, her reflection staring back at her from the polished metal. She had dressed carefully that morning. A navy blue suit she'd purchased during better times, a simple white blouse, minimal jewelry. Professional, confident, appropriate for her new position. But the butterflies in her stomach betrayed her. Outward composure. 3 months ago, she had left this building in tears, escorted by security, her personal belongings hastily packed into a cardboard box. Now she was returning not just as a reinstated employee, but as a senior consultant reporting directly to the CEO. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, and Sarah took a deep breath before stepping inside. As the doors closed and the car began, Its ascent to the executive floor, she thought about Lily's words that morning as she'd left for school. "Show them how smart you are, Mom," her daughter had said, hugging her tightly, "and tell Mr. Parker that Charlie says hi." The memory brought a smile to Sarah's face, steadying her nerves. Whatever challenges awaited her today, she would face them for Lily and for herself. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area she had never visited during her previous years at Meridian. Unlike the open-plan layout of the customer service, floors the executive level featured elegant furnishings, original artwork, and hushed conversations. Jeremy, Ethan's assistant, looked up from his desk and greeted her with a warm smile. "Ms. Anderson, welcome back to Meridian. Mr. Parker is expecting you." He rose and led her to a glass-walled office with spectacular views of Boston Harbor. "Can I get you anything? Coffee? Tea?" "I'm fine, thank you," Sarah replied, though her mouth felt dry. Ethan stood as she entered, coming around his desk to greet her. He was dressed more casually than she had seen him before, no tie, shirt sleeves rolled up, as if he'd been working intensely on something. "Sarah, thank you for coming." He gestured toward a comfortable seating area rather than the more formal arrangement at his desk. "I thought we'd start by discussing your initial impressions and priorities." As they sat down, Sarah noticed something on the coffee table between them, a familiar spiral-bound notebook, her customer thank you notes. She reached for it instinctively, running her fingers over the worn cover. "You found it," she said quietly. Ethan nodded. "Jeremy tracked it down in storage. I thought you might want it back." Sarah opened the notebook, leafing through the pages of handwritten notes and cards from customers she had helped over the years. Each one represented a problem solved, a relationship built, a moment of genuine human connection amid the often impersonal world of financial services. "This meant more to me than any performance review," she admitted. "Knowing I had made a difference in someone's life, even in a small way." "That's exactly why you're here," Ethan said. "Meridian has lost sight of that human element. We've become so focused on metrics and efficiency that we've forgotten our fundamental purpose, helping real people navigate their financial futures." He handed her a folder containing several documents. "This is the outline of your new role. As Senior Customer Experience Consultant, you'll have broad authority to review and recommend changes to our customer service protocols, training programs, and employee evaluation metrics. You'll report directly to me, bypassing the traditional management layers." Sarah skimmed the documents, noting the substantial salary increase and expanded responsibilities. "This is a significant promotion. It's commensurate with your experience, and the value I believe you'll bring," Ethan replied. "But I should warn you, not everyone is happy about your return or this new position. Linda Collins and Mark Winters in particular see it as a direct challenge to their authority." "Because it is," Sarah said bluntly. A smile touched Ethan's lips. "Yes, it is, and that's precisely why it's necessary. The system they've built prioritizes process over people, both for our customers and our employees. I need someone who can see beyond the spreadsheets and recognize the human costs of our decisions." Sarah closed the folder, meeting his gaze directly. "Why me? There must be dozens of consultants with more impressive credentials, people who haven't been labeled as troublemakers in your company." "That's exactly why it needs to be you," Ethan answered. "You've experienced firsthand what happens when the system fails, when process becomes more important than truth, when people are treated as disposable parts in a corporate machine." He leaned forward slightly. "And despite everything that happened, you still care about this company and its mission. I saw it in your face when you talked about your work, about the customers you helped." Sarah couldn't deny it. Despite the injustice of her termination, she had believed in what Meridian could be, a financial institution that genuinely helped people build secure futures. That vision had sustained her through years of working her way up from an entry-level position, balancing career advancement with single motherhood. "I do care," she admitted, "but I'm also realistic. Changing corporate culture isn't as simple as creating one new position or reinstating one employee. The problems run deeper." I know, Ethan agreed. That's why this is just the beginning. I've authorized an independent review of all terminations from the past 6 months. I've reinstated the Family First program with an expanded budget, and I've scheduled meetings with each department to reassess our priorities and practices. He stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city. But I can't do it alone. I need allies who understand both the practical realities of our business and the importance of maintaining our humanity in the process. He turned back to her. Are you willing to be one of those allies, Sarah? Not just as an employee, but as a partner in transforming what Meridian can be? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications that extended far beyond a job offer. Sarah thought about Lily, about the example she wanted to set for her daughter, about the opportunity to turn her own painful experience into something positive for others. Yes, she said simply, I am. The next weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sarah divided her time between reviewing customer service protocols, interviewing frontline employees, and developing recommendations for systemic changes. She expected resistance from middle management, particularly those loyal to Linda Collins, and she wasn't disappointed. Meetings often became tense when she questioned established procedures or suggested alternatives that prioritized employee well-being alongside efficiency metrics. But she also found allies. James Turner from Technology became an unexpected supporter, providing access to systems data that helped Sarah demonstrate the connection between employee satisfaction and customer retention. Younger managers, frustrated by rigid hierarchies, sought her out with ideas and observations they had previously been afraid to share. And Ethan proved to be a true partner in the transformation effort. He attended key meetings, backing Sarah's authority when challenged. He listened to her recommendations without defensiveness, even when they implied criticism of policies he had previously supported. Most importantly, he remained visibly committed to the change he had promised, despite growing pressure from certain board members concerned about the shift in priorities. 6 weeks after Sarah's return, Meridian held its annual Inspiration Day, a company-wide event designed to reinforce corporate values and recognize outstanding achievements. In previous years, it had been a carefully scripted affair focusing primarily on sales targets and efficiency improvements. This year, however, Ethan had insisted on a different approach. The main auditorium was filled with employees from all levels of the organization. After the standard presentations and awards, Ethan stepped to the podium for his closing remarks. Before we end today, I want to share a story that changed my perspective on what leadership truly means, he began. It's a story about courage, integrity, and the profound impact of seemingly small decisions. As Ethan recounted his encounter with Lily and the subsequent discovery of Sarah's wrongful termination, careful to focus on the systemic issues rather than individual blame, Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions. Part of her still carried the pain of those difficult months of unemployment, the struggle to maintain Lily's stability while fighting for recognition of the truth. But another part felt a growing sense of purpose, of being part of something meaningful beyond herself. That experience taught me that our greatest responsibility isn't to shareholders or even customers, Ethan continued. It's to each other, to the community of people who make Meridian what it is. When we forget that, when we sacrifice individual dignity for abstract metrics, we undermine the very foundation of our success. He paused, looking out over the audience. To help us remember that lesson, I've asked someone special to speak with you today. He turned toward the side of the stage. Lily Anderson, would you join me, please? Sarah straightened in her seat, shocked. This hadn't been part of the program she'd reviewed. She watched as her daughter walked onto the stage, wearing her best dress, her expression serious but composed. Charlie wasn't with her, of course, but she carried a framed photograph in her hands. Ethan adjusted the microphone to Lily's height. Lily has something she'd like to share with all of you. The 8-year-old looked out at the sea of faces without apparent fear. My mom works here now, she began, her clear voice carrying through the silent auditorium. But before, she lost her job, and it was really hard. We almost had to move away from our apartment. I had to sell my dog Charlie because we needed money for food and medicine. She held up the framed photo, a picture of herself with Charlie and Sarah, taken recently in their small backyard. But even when we lost almost everything, we were still lucky, because Mr. Parker bought Charlie, and then he brought him back. And then my mom got to come work here again. She looked up at Ethan with a smile that illuminated her whole face, and now she doesn't cry at night anymore when she thinks I'm asleep. A murmur passed through the audience at this unscripted revelation. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks, but also a surge of pride in her daughter's courage. The thing is, Lily continued seriously, everybody needs someone to believe them when they tell the truth. Mom always says that to me. And everybody needs a second chance, sometimes even grown-ups. She looked out at the audience again. So if you know someone who needs a second chance, maybe you could help them like Mr. Parker helped us. As Lily finished speaking, the auditorium erupted in applause, hesitant at first, then building to a sustained ovation. Ethan placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, his expression a mix of pride and something deeper, more personal. In that moment, Sarah recognized what she had begun to suspect over the past weeks, that Ethan's transformation was not merely professional, but deeply personal. A fundamental shift in how he understood his place in the world. After the event, as employees filed out of the auditorium, many stopped to introduce themselves to Sarah and Lily, sharing their own stories of challenges and second chances. What had begun as a corporate event had somehow transformed into something more authentic, a genuine connection between people who spent their days working side by side but rarely saw each other as complete human beings. Later, as Ethan drove them home, having insisted on giving them a ride rather than having them take the subway, Lily chatted excitedly about the experience from the back seat, while Sarah sat quietly, processing the day's events. "You didn't tell me she would be speaking," she said finally when Lily had paused for breath. "I wanted it to be a surprise," Ethan admitted. "She approached me about it last week when you brought her to the office. Asked if she could say thank you to everyone. I hope you're not upset." "No," Sarah said softly. "Not upset, just overwhelmed by all of this, by how quickly everything has changed." Ethan glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the road. Too quickly. The question contained layers of meaning that Sarah wasn't quite ready to address. Over the past weeks, their professional partnership had gradually developed undertones of something more personal. Shared lunches that extended beyond work discussions, text messages about Lily's school achievements, a growing ease in each other's company that transcended their roles as CEO and consultant. "Not too quickly," she said carefully, "just unexpectedly. 6 weeks ago I was sending out resumes and wondering how I would pay next month's rent. Now I'm helping reshape company policy and watching my daughter speak to hundreds of people about second chances." "She was amazing," Ethan said, genuine admiration in his voice. "She has your courage." "And your directness," Sarah replied with a small smile. "I think you've been a good influence on her." As they pulled up in front of Sarah's apartment building, Lily unbuckled her seatbelt eagerly. "Can Mr. Parker come up and see Charlie? I told him all about the new tricks I taught him." Sarah glanced at Ethan, raising an eyebrow in question. He smiled. "I'd like that if it's all right with your mom." And so Ethan Parker, CEO of Meridian Technologies, spent his Friday evening sitting on the floor of a modest Dorchester apartment, teaching Charlie to shake hands while Lily giggled and Sarah prepared a simple dinner. It was perhaps the most normal, most human evening he had experienced in years, and as he watched mother and daughter move around each other with the easy choreography of a close-knit family, he realized how much he had been missing by limiting his existence to boardrooms and performance reviews. The company was changing, yes, but so was he, and somehow that seemed like the most important transformation of all. Chapter 6. The Connection. Spring arrived in Boston with a suddenness that always took residents by surprise. One week, dirty snowbanks stubbornly clung to street corners. The next, cherry blossoms and daffodils transformed the public garden into a painter's palette of pinks and yellows. The city shook off its winter torpor. Sidewalk cafes unfolded their tables, and people lingered outdoors, Faces turned gratefully toward the strengthening sun. For Ethan Parker, the changing season mirrored the transformation occurring within Meridian Technologies and within himself. 3 months had passed since Sarah's return to the company, 3 months of challenging work, difficult conversations, and incremental but meaningful changes. The independent review of terminations had identified 17 cases requiring remedy, resulting in offers of reinstatement or settlement. The Family First program had been expanded to include emergency childcare and financial counseling services. And perhaps most significantly, a new performance evaluation system was being piloted, one that considered not just numerical metrics, but also customer feedback, peer reviews, and professional development. Not everyone embraced these changes. Linda Collins had resigned 2 weeks earlier, citing philosophical differences with the new direction. Several mid-level managers had followed her example, but others had stepped up, energized by the opportunity to build something better, something more sustainable than the relentless pursuit of quarterly gains at any cost. Through it all, Sarah had been Ethan's most valuable ally, challenging his assumptions, providing insights from the employee perspective, and ensuring that policy changes translated into meaningful improvements in people's daily work lives. Their professional partnership had deepened into genuine respect and trust, and increasingly into something more personal that neither had yet fully acknowledged. It was Sarah who had suggested today's outing. "Lily's spring break starts Friday," she had mentioned during one of their regular strategy sessions. "I was thinking of taking her to the Children's Museum. She's been asking to go for months." "That sounds like fun," Ethan had replied, smiling. At the thought of Lily's enthusiasm, "I haven't been there since I was a kid myself." "You should join us," Sarah had said, the invitation casual, yet somehow weighted with significance. "If you're not too busy with CEO things." And so here he was on a Saturday morning in April, walking beside Sarah as Lily ran ahead of them along the harbour walk, Charlie trotting happily at her side on his leash. The museum allowed dogs in certain areas, Sarah had explained, and Lily had insisted that Charlie needed cultural enrichment too. "She seems different," Ethan observed, watching as Lily paused to examine a harbour seal that had surfaced nearby. "More confident." Sarah nodded, smiling as her daughter waved excitedly for them to hurry up. "She is. The last few months have been healing, I think. For both of us." She glanced at Ethan. "Having stability makes such a difference. Knowing we don't have to worry about the basics anymore. And Charlie being back home," Ethan added with a smile. "That too." Sarah tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture Ethan had come to recognize as a sign she was gathering her thoughts. "You know, she talks about you all the time. Mr. Parker said this, or Mr. Parker thinks that. You've made quite an impression." "She's made quite an impression on me too," Ethan admitted. "I've never met a kid with such a clear moral compass. Must be good parenting." Sarah laughed softly. "I'd love to take all the credit, but I think that's just Lily. She came into the world with an old soul." She paused. "Though I try to reinforce it. We talk a lot about right and wrong, about standing up for what you believe in even when it's hard." "Like selling your dog to buy medicine for your mum," Ethan said quietly. "Yes." Sarah's expression softened, with remembered pain. "I still can't believe she did that. I had no idea she was planning it until she came home that evening and told me what had happened." She looked at Ethan. "And then you showed up at our door 2 days later with Charlie. And that look on your face, like you'd seen something that changed everything." "I had," Ethan said simply. He stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "Sarah, I need to tell you something I should have said earlier." The seriousness in his tone made her stop as well, her expression curious but not alarmed. "What is it?" "Meeting Lily that day and then meeting you did change everything for me, not just professionally but personally. Before that I was just existing, going through the motions of success without any real purpose or connection." He glanced toward Lily, who was now crouched down with Charlie, watching a small crab scuttle across the rocks below the walkway. "When she handed me that puppy adoption contract, so serious and determined to do the right thing even when it broke her heart, it woke something up in me." Something I think I'd lost a long time ago. Sarah's eyes softened. Empathy? Yes. But also, he searched for the right words, a sense of what really matters, of what makes a life meaningful. A light breeze lifted Sarah's hair, and she pushed it back again, her gaze steady on his face. And what is that? What makes a life meaningful, Ethan Parker? The question hung between them, simple yet profound. Ethan thought about his sleek penthouse apartment with its expensive furniture and empty spaces, about the achievements and accolades that had filled his resume but somehow left him feeling hollow, about the connections he had sacrificed in pursuit of professional advancement. And then he thought about the last 3 months, about Friday evenings spent in Sarah's small but warm apartment, helping Lily with science projects or playing board games that invariably ended in laughter, about the homemade meals Sarah insisted on preparing whenever he visited, claiming it was only fair since he often covered lunch at work, about walks in the park with Charlie, who now greeted him with enthusiastic affection whenever he arrived. Connection, he said finally. Real connection with people who see you for who you are, not what you can do for them. Purpose that goes beyond profit margins and performance metrics. The chance to make someone else's life better, even in small ways. Sarah's expression was thoughtful, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. That's a pretty significant realization for a corporate CEO. It is, Ethan agreed, and I have you and Lily to thank for it. He hesitated, then added, more quietly, especially you, Sarah. Working with you, getting to know you these past months, it's changed me in ways I'm still discovering. Something shifted in her eyes, a recognition perhaps of the undercurrent that had been building between them. But before she could respond, Lily's voice called out from ahead. Mom, Mr. Parker! Come quick. Charlie found something cool. The moment paused, suspended between them like a held breath. Then Sarah smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reached her eyes. We should probably go see what cool thing might require immediate veterinary attention. Probably, Ethan agreed, returning her smile. But Sarah, can we continue this conversation later? Yes, she said simply. I'd like that. The Children's Museum proved to be exactly the kind of organized chaos one might expect on a Saturday during school vacation week, full of excited children, patient parents, and interactive exhibits designed to educate through play. Lily moved from station to station with boundless energy, equally enthusiastic about building structures in the construction zone, creating bubbles in the science area, and exploring the Japanese house exhibit. Ethan found himself drawn into her world with surprising ease, kneeling beside her to help construct a marble run, laughing as she challenged him to create bigger bubbles, listening attentively as she explained the significance of various elements in the Japanese house, based on a book she had read. Sarah moved with them, sometimes participating, sometimes stepping back to watch their interactions with a thoughtful expression. In the art studio, Lily decided they should all create something. A family portrait, she announced, distributing paper and art supplies with the authority of a seasoned teacher. With Charlie, too. Ethan glanced at Sarah, wondering if she would correct Lily's characterization, but she simply smiled and began sketching. For the next half hour, they worked on their creations, Lily periodically checking on their progress and offering encouraging comments. Yours is really good, Mr. Parker, she said, peering over his shoulder at his attempt to capture Charlie's playful expression. You're better at drawing than Mom. Hey, Sarah protested good-naturedly. I'll have you know I was art club president in high school. A very long time ago, Lily teased, giggling as Sarah pretended to look offended. Watch it, kiddo, I control. Your dessert privileges. Ethan watched their easy banter with a sense of wistful admiration. His own childhood had been markedly different, structured, achievement-oriented, with parents who valued academic success over emotional connection. He had been raised to be exceptional, not happy. It was only now, approaching middle age, that he was beginning to understand the cost of that approach. Mr. Parker, you look sad, Lily observed, her perceptive eyes studying his face. Don't you like museums? I love museums, Ethan assured her quickly, and I'm not sad at all. I was just thinking about how much fun I'm having with you and your mom. Lily nodded, apparently satisfied with this explanation. We have fun with you too, right, Mom? Sarah met Ethan's gaze over her daughter's head. Yes, we do, she agreed, softly. Later, after lunch at the museum cafe and a final visit to the gift shop, where Ethan insisted on buying Lily a science kit she had been eyeing, they made their way back along the harbour walk toward where Ethan had parked his car. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the walkway, and a cool breeze off the water prompted Lily to button her jacket, no longer the oversized pink coat from winter, but a new spring jacket in her favourite purple, a gift from Ethan that Sarah had initially resisted, but ultimately accepted. Can we get ice cream? Lily asked, her energy apparently undiminished by hours of museum exploration. There's a really good place near here. They have special ice cream for dogs too, so Charlie can have some. Sarah checked her watch. I suppose we could if Mr. Parker doesn't have other plans for this evening. No plans, Ethan confirmed. Ice cream sounds perfect. The ice cream shop was a small, family-owned establishment tucked away on a side street with bright murals on the walls and a cheerful chalkboard listing the day's special flavors. They found a table outside where Charlie could join them, and soon were enjoying their selections. Strawberry for Lily, coffee for Sarah, and dark chocolate for Ethan, with a small cup of plain frozen yogurt for Charlie, who lapped it up enthusiastically. This is the best day, Lily declared, ice cream smeared across her cheek despite Sarah's periodic attempts to clean it with a napkin. We should do this every Saturday. Every Saturday might be a bit much, Sarah said gently. Mr. Parker has his own life, you know. He can't spend all his free time with us. Lily looked at Ethan questioningly. Do you have a family too? Like, other kids you take to museums? The directness of the question caught Ethan off guard. No, he answered honestly. I don't have children of my own. Are you married? Lily? Sarah interjected, her tone mildly scolding. That's a personal question. It's okay, Ethan assured her, then turned back to Lily. No, I'm not married. I was a long time ago, but we got divorced. That means we decided not to be married anymore. Lily nodded sagely. Like Tommy in my class, his parents got divorced and now he has 2 houses. She considered this information. So you live all by yourself? I do. Isn't that lonely? Sarah put a hand on her daughter's arm. Lily, honey, not everyone needs to live with other people to be happy. Some people enjoy having their own space. It is lonely sometimes, Ethan admitted, surprising himself with his candor. I have a nice apartment, but it doesn't always feel like a home, he smiled at Lily. That's why I enjoy visiting you and your mom. Your apartment feels like a real home. Lily beamed at this, because we're there and Charlie. She took another bite of her ice cream, then added matter-of-factly, you should come over more, then you wouldn't be lonely. Sarah gave Ethan an apologetic look, but he shook his head slightly, indicating no apology was necessary. There was something refreshing about Lily's straightforward approach to human connection. No games, no hidden agendas, just the simple recognition that people need each other. I'd like that, he said sincerely, if it's okay with your mom. Sarah met his gaze, her expression soft. Our door is always open to you, Ethan. You know that. The simple statement carried weight beyond its literal meaning, and Ethan felt something shift inside him, a piece of his carefully constructed professional persona falling away to reveal something more authentic underneath. As they finished their ice cream and began the walk back to the car, Lily skipped ahead with Charlie, leaving Ethan and Sarah to follow at a more sedate pace. The late afternoon light cast a golden glow over the harbour, painting the city skyline in warm hues that softened its urban edges. She's right, you know, Sarah said after a comfortable silence, about it being a good day, one of the best in a long time. For me too, Ethan admitted. I can't remember the last time I spent a Saturday doing something just for fun. No networking, no business dinners disguised as social events. Just enjoying the moment. Sarah glanced at him. That's a little sad, actually. It is, he agreed. I've been thinking a lot about that lately, about the choices I've made, the priorities I've set. Building a career seemed so important that I let everything else fade into the background. He paused. Or maybe that was just easier than dealing with the messiness of real relationships. Messiness is part of the package, Sarah said with a small smile. You can't have the joy without the complications. I'm beginning to understand that. Ethan watched as Lily crouched down to show Charlie something on the ground, a seashell perhaps, or an interesting rock. Sarah, about what I started to say earlier. She turned toward him, her expression open but cautious. Yes? These past few months, getting to know you and Lily, being welcomed into your lives, it's made me realize what I've been missing. Not just personally, but... He hesitated, searching for the right words. There's a depth to the way you live, an authenticity that I've never managed to achieve in my own life. You care deeply about things that matter, about people, about principles, about creating a genuine home for Lily, and I admire that enormously. Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering his words. It wasn't always a choice, she said finally. Being a single mother, you learn to focus on what's essential. The luxury of ambition for its own sake isn't always available. That's not what I meant, Ethan said quickly. I'm not romanticizing the struggles you've faced. I'm saying that despite those struggles, or maybe because of them, you've created something real and valuable, something I've spent my entire adult life chasing. In all the wrong places. They had reached a small viewing area overlooking the harbor, and Sarah paused, leaning against the railing. Ahead of them, Lily had found a family with a golden retriever and was introducing Charlie with the easy sociability of childhood. What are you really trying to say, Ethan? Sarah asked quietly, her eyes on her daughter rather than him. Ethan took a deep breath. I'm trying to say that I care about you, Sarah, not just as a colleague or a friend, but as more than that. And I care about Lily too. He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly feeling awkward despite his usual professional composure. I know it's complicated. I'm your boss, technically, and there's the age difference and your history with the company. I understand if you don't feel the same way or if the timing isn't right. But after everything we've shared these past months, I needed you to know. Sarah turned to face him fully, her expression unreadable for a long moment. Then a smile slowly spread across her face, not the polite, professional smile she wore at work, but something warmer, more intimate. I was wondering when you'd finally say something, she said, a hint of teasing in her voice. I was starting to think I might have to make the first move myself. Relief and joy surged through Ethan. You mean... I care about you too, Ethan Parker. More than I expected to, especially given how we met. She glanced toward Lily, who was now showing the golden retriever's owner how Charlie could shake hands. And yes, it's complicated. Everything about this situation is complicated. But the way I feel when I'm with you, that part is surprisingly simple. Without thinking, Ethan reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. The contact was electric, sending a current of connection between them that transcended words. For a moment they stood together in silence, watching Lily and Charlie, the sun beginning its descent toward the horizon behind them. So what happens now? Ethan asked finally. Sarah squeezed his hand gently. Now we take it one day at a time. We figure it out as we go, just like everyone else. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the golden light. But whatever happens, I'm glad Charlie decided you were worthy of adoption. Ethan laughed softly. So am I. Best $50 I ever spent. 300, Sarah corrected with a smile. Don't think I've forgotten your extravagant overpayment. Worth every penny, Ethan replied, his voice quiet but certain. For everything it led to. Lily's voice called out to them then, breaking the moment. Mom, Mr. Parker, this lady says there's a free concert in the park tomorrow. Can we go? Sarah and Ethan exchanged a look of shared understanding before Sarah called back. We'll talk about it when you come back. Here, Lily. As they watched Lily say goodbye to the dog and its owners, Ethan felt a sense of rightness settle over him, a feeling that despite all the uncertainties ahead, he was exactly where he was meant to be. With Sarah's hand still in his, the future suddenly seemed full of possibilities he had never allowed himself to imagine before. And all because of a little girl in a pink coat selling her best friend on a cold Boston afternoon. Chapter 7. The Promise. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the rolling meadows of Blue Hills Reservation, just outside Boston. Splashes of red and gold painted the landscape as nature prepared for its seasonal transformation. Ethan Parker sat on a weathered wooden bench, watching Lily race across an open field with Charlie, both of them reveling in the freedom of the wide-open space. Sarah stood a short distance away, capturing the moment with her camera, a hobby she had recently rediscovered after years of setting aside personal interests for work and motherhood. 6 months had passed since that spring day at the harbor when everything changed between them. 6 months of careful navigation through the complexities of their evolving relationship, professional boundaries redrawn, personal connections deepened, a future together gradually taking shape. It hadn't been without challenges. Linda Collins, upon leaving Meridian, had joined a competing firm and made it her mission to undermine Ethan's leadership, whispering to board members about his emotional decision-making and inappropriate personal entanglements. The implication that his relationship with Sarah was clouding his business judgment had gained traction with certain conservative members of the board, leading to tense quarterly meetings and constant pressure to prove that Meridian's new direction was financially sound. Ethan had met the challenge head-on, working closely with Robert Jenkins to demonstrate that the company's customer retention had improved significantly under the new policies, while employee turnover, a major hidden cost, had decreased by nearly 30%. The Family First program, far from being a financial drain, had actually improved productivity by reducing unplanned absences and increasing staff loyalty. And Sarah's revamped customer experience protocols had led to a measurable increase in client referrals, the most valuable form of new business acquisition. The numbers told a compelling story, but Ethan knew that not everyone on the board was convinced. Some still viewed his transformation as a temporary aberration, a midlife crisis that would eventually give way to the hard-nosed approach that had characterized his earlier career. They tolerated his social experiments as long as quarterly targets were met, but their skepticism remained palpable. Ethan found he cared less about their opinion with each passing day. The validation he once sought from peers and superiors had been replaced by something more meaningful. The sense of purpose that came from building a company where people could thrive, not merely survive. And the joy he found in his growing relationship with Sarah and Lily, a connection that had awakened parts of himself he had long neglected. "Penny for your thoughts," Sarah said, sitting beside him on the bench. She had captured whatever moment she wanted with her camera, and now turned her attention to him, her expression curious. "Just reflecting," Ethan replied, taking her hand in his. "On everything that's changed this year." Sarah smiled, following, his gaze to where Lily was now teaching Charlie to chase leaves as they fell from a nearby maple tree. "It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?" "The best kind," Ethan agreed, "the kind that changes you for the better." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, enjoying the crisp air and the peaceful surroundings. These weekend excursions had become a regular part of their routine, escapes from the city where they could simply be together without the pressures of their professional roles. Sometimes they visited museums or historic sites, fulfilling Lily's endless curiosity about the world. Other times, like today, they sought out natural spaces where Charlie could run freely, and they could all breathe a little deeper. "I had a call with the board chairman yesterday," Ethan said finally, "about my contract renewal." Sarah turned to him, concern flickering across her features. "And?" "They're offering a 2-year extension, with conditions. They want quarterly reviews of all new initiatives with clear metrics for success, and they've suggested creating a separate foundation for the Family First program and other social responsibility efforts, as they call them. Technically still part of Meridian, but with its own budget and oversight committee. They're trying to contain what they see as your more radical impulses," Sarah observed, her tone more amused than worried. creating a box they can point to and say, "See, we care about people too," while keeping the main business focused on traditional metrics. Ethan nodded. That's exactly it. It's not ideal, but it's a start. And having a dedicated foundation might actually make it easier to expand those programs without constant budgetary battles. So you're going to accept? The question hung in the air between them, weighted with implications beyond his career. When they had first begun discussing a future together, Ethan had promised Sarah that any major decisions would be made jointly, recognizing that his choices now affected not just himself but her and Lily as well. "I wanted to talk to you about it first," he said. "There are other options. I've had inquiries from a couple of investment firms looking for someone to lead their social impact divisions, and there's always the possibility of starting something entirely new." Sarah considered this thoughtfully. "What do you want, Ethan? Not what's practical or strategic, but what would make you feel like you're doing what you're meant to do. It was the kind of question she often asked him, direct, cutting through layers of conditioning to the heart of the matter. One of the many reasons he had fallen in love with her. "I want to finish what we started at Meridian," he admitted. "The work isn't done. We've made progress, but there's still so much potential to create genuine change from within. And having a platform like Meridian gives us leverage we wouldn't have starting from scratch." He squeezed her hand gently. "But it has to work for all of us. The hours are still demanding, the pressure is constant, and as long as I'm there, our relationship will be subject to scrutiny and gossip." "We've managed so far," Sarah pointed out. "The new reporting structure helps." Early in their relationship, they had restructured the organization so that Sarah reported to James Turner rather than directly to Ethan, removing the most obvious conflict of interest. "And I'm not exactly fragile when it comes to office politics. I survived Linda Collins, remember?" Ethan smiled at the reminder. "You more than survived, you thrived." Under Sarah's leadership, the customer experience team had become one of Meridian's most innovative departments, developing protocols that were now being studied by other financial institutions. "But it's not just about work. It's about our life together, the future we're building. I don't want my job to overshadow that." "It won't," Sarah said with quiet confidence, "because we won't let it." She looked toward Lily, who had discovered a small stream and was carefully testing its depth with a stick, Charlie watching attentively from the bank. "She's happy, Ethan. Happier than I've seen her in years. And so am I. Whatever decisions we make about work, that foundation is solid." Ethan felt a surge of gratitude for this remarkable woman who had entered his life at precisely the moment he needed her perspective most. "You know, most people would be pushing me to take the safe option, to secure my position and the financial benefits that come with it." "I'm not most people," Sarah replied with a smile. "And money has never been what drives you, even when you thought it was. You need purpose, meaningful work, the sense that you're making a difference. That's who you are." She was right, of course. Throughout his career, Ethan had chased success as defined by others, promotions, compensation packages, industry recognition. It was only when he stepped back and questioned those metrics that he had found genuine fulfillment. "I've been thinking about something else too," he said, his voice dropping slightly as he prepared to share the thought that had been forming in his mind for weeks now. "Something more personal." Sarah raised an eyebrow, her expression curious but patient. "We've been together for 6 months now," Ethan continued, "spending most of our free time together, getting to know each other in all the important ways, and I've never been more certain about anything in my life than I am about us." Understanding dawned in Sarah's eyes, a mixture of surprise and emotion, crossing her features. "Ethan, I'm not proposing right now," he clarified quickly. "I know that would be too soon, especially for Lily, but I wanted you to know that's where my heart is heading, toward making this official, creating a family together, building a life that encompasses all the things we care about, not just work, but home and community and purpose." Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her smile was radiant. "I'm heading there too," she said softly. "I think I have been since that day at the harbor, maybe even before that. When you showed up at our door with Charlie, something in me recognized something in you. even when I was still angry about what had happened. Soul recognizing soul, Ethan murmured, recalling a phrase his grandmother had often used. Despite all the barriers and complications. Yes. Sarah leaned into him slightly, her shoulder against his. So we take the 2-year contract, continue the work at Meridian and see where life takes us. No rush, no pressure, just moving forward together, one step at a time. Lily's voice interrupted their moment, calling from the stream bank. "Mom, Mr. Parker, come see what Charlie found." They exchanged a knowing smile at her continued use of the formal address, despite Ethan's gentle suggestion months ago that she could call him by his first name. "I'm still your mum's boss at work," he had explained, "but when we're together like this, I'm just Ethan." Lily had considered this seriously before declaring, "Maybe when you're really part of our family. Until then, you're still Mr. Parker." The memory warmed Ethan as they rose from the bench and walked toward the stream, where Lily was pointing excitedly at something in the shallow water. "Look, tadpoles! There are hundreds of them." Sure enough, the clear water revealed clusters of tiny black forms darting among the stones. Ethan crouched beside Lily, Charlie crowding between them to investigate the discovery. "Baby frogs," he confirmed. "They'll grow legs soon and lose their tails, then leave the water as fully formed frogs." Lily's eyes widened with fascination. "A total transformation, like in my science book." "Exactly like that," Sarah said, joining them at the water's edge. "Nature is full of transformations, things becoming what they were always meant to be." Her eyes met Ethan's over Lily's head, the parallel to their own journey together clear. In her gaze, from adversaries to allies to something much deeper, each stage revealing new aspects of themselves, leading them toward a shared future. Neither could have imagined that cold January day when a little girl in a pink coat changed everything. "Can we come back next weekend to see if they have legs yet?" Lily asked, still captivated by the tadpoles. "We'll have to check the weather," Sarah replied. "But yes, we can make that our plan." "Yes!" Lily pumped her fist in triumph, then turned to Ethan with sudden seriousness. "Mr. Parker, do you think Charlie will try to eat the frogs when they come out of the water?" Ethan couldn't help but laugh. "We'll keep him on his leash near the stream just to be safe, but I think he's more interested in chasing squirrels than frogs." At the word squirrels, Charlie's ears perked up, his head swiveling to scan the nearby trees. Lily giggled, patting his head affectionately. "Don't worry, Charlie. We won't let you eat anything you're not supposed to." As the afternoon light began to soften toward evening, they made their way back across the meadow toward the parking area. Lily ran ahead with Charlie, her energy seemingly inexhaustible, while Ethan and Sarah followed at a more leisurely pace, their hands naturally finding each other's. "There's something I've been meaning to give you," Ethan said, reaching into his jacket pocket with his free hand. "I've been carrying it around for weeks, waiting for the right moment." He withdrew a small velvet pouch, similar to the one described in the notebook they had found while cleaning out his mother's house the previous month. The story of a bracelet passed down through generations of women in his family, given as a symbol of enduring connection. Sarah stopped walking, her eyes fixed on the pouch. "Ethan, it's not an engagement ring," he assured her, opening the drawstring to reveal a delicate silver bracelet set with small sapphires. "It belonged to my grandmother, and then my mother. The story goes that my grandfather gave it to my grandmother when he knew she was the one he wanted to spend his life with. But before they were ready to announce it to the world, a private promise between them." He held it out to her, the silver catching the late afternoon light. "I want you to have it, as a symbol of what we've found together and what we're building. No pressure, no timeline, just a recognition of what we both know is true." Sarah took the bracelet with trembling fingers, examining the intricate design and the deep blue stones. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Then, looking up at him with eyes full of emotion, she added, "And yes." To the unspoken question behind it, yes. Ethan fastened the bracelet around her wrist, his fingers lingering on her pulse point. The moment felt sacred somehow, a commitment deeper than words could express. Not yet a formal engagement, but a promise just as binding in its own way. From ahead of them, Lily called back, "Are you guys coming? Charlie's getting hungry." "Just a minute, honey," Sarah called in return, her eyes still on Ethan's. Then, with a mischievous smile, she added in a lower voice, "We should probably move before she comes back to investigate. I'm not ready to explain this just yet." "Agreed," Ethan said, reluctantly releasing her hand. "Though I think she'll approve when the time comes. She's been dropping hints for months." Sarah laughed softly. "Subtle as a bulldozer, that one. Last week she asked me if you could come to her career day at school and mentioned that some kids have stepfathers who are really cool." The casual reference to a future where he would be Lily's stepfather filled Ethan with unexpected emotion. The journey from isolated corporate executive to part of this small, fierce family had transformed him in ways he was still discovering. And the road ahead promised even more growth, more joy, more purpose than he had ever dared to imagine for himself. As they reached the parking area, Lily was already waiting by the car, Charlie sitting patiently at her feet. The sight of them together, the little girl who had sold her dog to buy medicine for her mother, the dog who had found his way back home, and the woman who had taught Ethan what truly mattered, filled his heart with a certainty he had never known in his years of corporate achievement. This was success. This was meaning. This was the life he had been searching for without knowing it. "Ready to go home?" Sarah asked, the new bracelet catching the light as she reached for Lily's hand. "Yes," Ethan replied, meaning far more than the simple answer suggested. "I'm ready." And as they drove back toward Boston, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of promise, Ethan knew with absolute clarity that the greatest transformation wasn't what had happened at Meridian or even in his professional identity. It was the opening of his heart to the kind of connection he had spent most of his life avoiding, messy, complicated, and infinitely precious. All because a little girl had offered her only friend for sale on a cold winter day, and in doing so had saved not just her mother's life, but his as well. "Look, Mum," Lily said from the back seat, pointing out the window at the golden skyline of the city emerging before them. "It looks like everything is glowing." "It does," Sarah agreed, her fingers unconsciously touching the bracelet on her wrist. "Like a new beginning." "Or a homecoming," Ethan added quietly, his eyes meeting Sarah's for a brief, perfect moment of understanding before returning to the road ahead. In the back seat, Charlie rested his head on Lily's lap, his eyes drooping with contented exhaustion. The puppy who had once been offered for sale had found his true home, just as they all had in the family they were creating together. And that, Ethan reflected as they drove toward the glowing city, was a transformation worth every step of the journey.